and we really, Robbie and I, Robbie, I don't know if you want to say hi real quick.
Hi, Robbie Karesh, TDEC.
Yeah, we're really honored to be able to speak on this topic today. I've had the privilege of being with Robbie, with my client, if you will, in MS4, while he's done some audits, and have learned a lot from him through that process. And we're really honored to be able to speak on this topic today. And so what we did is we sent out a questionnaire, or Charlene did, back a couple of months ago. And we've got some answers to those questions that we're gonna, or those responses, I guess, from those questions that she sent out that we're gonna go through. But we're gonna get started with Robbie going through kind of what's the audit all about, just kind of a high level view of that. And then we're going to get into some of the responses from the questionnaire that we sent out. And we're going to have some takeaways from that. And then the goal is to leave plenty of time for discussion and questions. If you do want to use the chat while we're talking, that's another way to provide feedback to us or maybe ask questions. And then as I'm speaking, Robbie and Charlene will be looking at the chat. And as Robbie's speaking, myself and Charlene will be looking at the chat. And so we might interrupt the speaker to address something, or we may just wait until till the end. But we want this to be somewhat informal and helpful to y'all. So we really welcome your questions. So with that, I'm going to let Robbie introduce himself and go ahead and share his screen and do his presentation, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Robbie Karesh. I'm with TDEC Water Resources. I've been with TDEC for several years. I work out of the central office, which is downtown Nashville. And me and my partner, Brown Patton, who you guys might know also, work statewide. And we predominantly do the audits for the MS4s. And I'm pleased to see so many new names, because what you're going to see as far as my slides are going to be familiar to you if you went to the last conference. What is our audit process? How did we structure it? What's the frequency of it? What can you expect? And so we thought we'd run through those same slides as kind of a framework for today's discussion, as a basis for, what is an audit and what is the state doing with that information, or how's that information used? So once again, it's great to meet you guys. And if I haven't met you already, hopefully I'll meet you here soon, either at a conference or at an audit. We'll see. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's see, let's share this one. Okay. Somebody can let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Thank you. Let me go like this. Oh, crap. Sorry. All right. All right. I think I can see that. There we go. One second. Computer closer. Now I got it. All right. So today we're going to go through kind of our audit, our compliance evaluation program for the small MS4. Now, mind you, there are small MS4s under the general permit, and then there are medium and large MS4s based upon their population that are under individual permits. The same principle applies, but what you're about to see as far as the presentation is really narrow and specific to how we're approaching the general phase 2 MS4s. Ultimately, our overall program has two main areas of focus, two goals in it. One, we have to have assurance of the compliance status of our permittees, and that's all of our permittees, MS4s included. So one is to have a program that fairly and effectively and consistently looks at compliance for permit requirements. And the other part of it is to build strong relationships between our programs and the local jurisdictions. Collaboratively, we have much better ability to prevent future water quality and to chip away at existing water quality, working collaboratively and through a relationship that really is helpful from a watershed scale. And so primary goals is one, see how you guys are doing for compliance, and then two, make sure that we're able to connect as best as we can and build a relationship that's really helpful for both of us. For overall compliance, we obviously check, to see whether or not you're meeting your permit requirements. So compliance starts with what are the requirements in the existing permit, and then how we look at compliance, how we structure it, what the focus of it. A lot of that is based on our overall experience doing audits and compliance efforts with other program areas, as well as looking at EPA's and the federal's guidelines for for the MS4 permit, for the requirements of the MS4 program, and then also for how they do their audits and structure their compliance inspections. So we take all of that, we kind of mesh it together, roll it into our program. Ultimately, the MS4 itself is a complicated permit program, and it has some main program areas. Predominantly, your stormwater management minimum control measures, MCM 1 through 6. And then also it's ordinances, policies, procedures, and then monitoring and reporting. So those are the main program things that we look through. Now, our overall compliance evaluation, for an MS4 has two components to it. One is an audit, and one is a compliance evaluation inspection, or a CEI. And so audits and compliance evaluation inspections, when we look at an MS4, we do two different. The audit itself is looking at the entire program. So all those minimum control measures, your ordinances, your policies, the entire program itself. A compliance evaluation inspection is looking at one slice of your program. So we're going to look at minimum control measure 3, your illicit program, or minimum control measure 4, your construction program. So audit, comprehensive, looking at the entire program, and then a CEI, looking at just one slice or one part of your program. Ultimately, for our preparation, we look at what we have historically on record for you guys, what you provided to us in your original NOI application, the information you provide to us in the reports, all the feedback that we get throughout the years, communicating with y'all about related complaints and things like that. We check all of our files looking for all that background information. Then we also start taking a look at your current program, components and materials, ordinances, your websites, enforcement plans, things along those lines. Give us a real good sense of what we should expect to see, and then help us to kind of better maybe focus some of our audit questions to really get to some things that we're not as clear on. The audit itself, now I'm talking about audits here, not the CEI or the compliance inspection, evaluation inspection. We're talking about the audit, the entire program audit. For those, there's 2 days, or there's 2 visits with you guys. One is in the office, and that's where we work through our audit worksheet, asking questions related to your procedures, your policies, your education, illicit, working all the way through all your minimum control measures. We look for documentation of a lot of those program areas and its implementation. The audits predominantly right now we're doing are in person. We were doing them mostly online, virtually during COVID. And we're still prepared to kind of do that just based upon how things look from a COVID standpoint. But we have done those both ways. And so that typically takes a whole day. I typically look at your ordinances policies first. We talk about that, and then we move through the minimum control measures. But once again, just looking for, what are you doing? And can you show me some examples of where you've implemented that? And we go through that process, kind of collecting all the documentation. That's day one. On day two is when we go out in the field and physically look at some sites. We look at the minimum at some construction sites and at a municipal facility. For the construction site, we basically want to verify what we found looking at your site inspection procedures. So what you had as far as on paper for your procedures, is that what you guys are doing out in the field? So we want to observe you do an inspection. We want to see you go through what one would typically be for you and how you would typically document it, how you would typically communicate whatever you found for correction, and then how, some examples of how you've, followed up to make sure that corrective action is completed. And so we're not looking so much at the compliance status of the construction site as much as looking at y'all's, the MS4's program staff and the implementation of the procedures that y'all are following with the goal of being consistent across all construction activities in the jurisdiction. In addition to the construction, we also will do at least one municipal facility visit. And typically that's like a public works facility, it's a roads department, it's a place where you have a lot of bulk storage of materials and lots of vehicle maintenance or equipment, opportunities and pollutant potential. So we'll go take a look at one of those facilities. We'll compare and contrast what their site operation maintenance plan said they would be doing. Are they actually doing that on site? And then ultimately, does it look effective? Are there any water quality issues? Are there any potential water quality issues? And then how has the site been, evaluating itself and documenting its ongoing operation and maintenance activities? So that is it's different than looking at the construction site, where we're looking more at y'all's procedures for doing inspections. For the municipal facility, we are going to do a physical. We are going to do an inspection of the facility itself, looking to see if there's a water quality issue. If there are issues on site, we will require that those issues get corrected as part of the audit itself. After those 2 days, first day paperwork, second day field work, we come back and we kind of do an overview of what we found. It's really, really, really important to us to make sure we are clear on what we found and what we didn't find. And so what you'll have is a lot of back and forth questions from me, kind of triaging and, picking through just to make sure I understand exactly, from 1 through 5, what parts do you have and do you not have? And so I can fairly, write that into your audit letter. Typically our letters come out about 30 days after the audit itself, but I will share with you during this closeout meeting at the end of the audit, kind of what I found, kind of the overall scope of it, and maybe a little bit of what to expect as far as the tone and the nature of the letter that's coming, and then make sure that we're clear on how to respond to the audit findings, and of course, lean on me or Brown if there's any related questions, so that everybody's clear on what was found and what needs to be done, so that there's successful compliance. I didn't mention this, but I thought we had it in the slide somewhere. My apologies. There's a frequency to all this that you have to be aware of. So we're doing an audit, which is the entire program, and a CEI, which is a part of your program. We're doing both of those within a 5-year permit period. Okay. So you should expect to see us at least twice within that 5-year period to do a full-blown audit, and then to do a smaller CEI, focused CEI. And so depending on what you've had last and how long it's been, will give you kind of an indication of what you can expect as far as when, we'll be touching base with you to set up your next inspection or audit. All right, so I will pause and then.
Yeah. Hey, Robbie,
yes, sir.
Before I get going, we've got 2 questions that I think you could help answer.
Sure.
That were in the chat.
Let me unshare.
Okay. Yeah, the first question here was from Quinn about the. I just lost it. Hold on a second. There it is. Do you plan on doing field visits for permanent stormwater control measures in the new permit?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And we would look at those somewhat now. It's just we're not drawing a lot of focus on what you guys are currently doing with post-construction because of the way the appeal was.
Right.
But yeah, there's been several jurisdictions that have a lot of post-construction insulation that they show us during an audit. And that helps me to get a better sense of where they are and what they may need to, kind of tweak to bring them up to where the new permit is. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like yet, but expect that that's going to be a part of the program and expect to kind of roll in progressively, I guess, as we get into the next permit, along with the timelines of the next permit. So I'm not going to come check on something in the first month that you don't have to have done within 24 months, right? So just kind of keep that in mind, but expect us to have more of a focus on post-construction.
Okay. So we've got a couple more here. So from Marilyn Wilbur, she asks, are sites that TDEC visits with the MS4 chosen by TDEC or by the MS4?
Mostly by the MS4. Once again, it's not necessarily the site itself isn't as important as us having a good site where we can see your process. Typically, I'm going to want to see a site that has a buffer or a sediment basin, because those are things that we have to verify as part of your plans review. So typically it's the obvious site for us to go look at. Now, if we have an issue that we're aware of within the jurisdiction, a concern that we have, we may go to a specific site just to see get more familiar with what's going on with the compliance on that site itself. But predominantly, we're going to look for the MS4 to show us a good candidate. And then ultimately, I find it helpful to use a singular construction activity as the example for the plans review, through the approval, through the pre-con, through the inspections, through the enforcement, because it shows how your whole program is implemented using one site as an example. But sometimes, depending on the jurisdiction, you might not have any new development or anything really to show us. And so it really just depends.
Okay. Another question, is the CEI focus area you choose completely random? And then related to that is a question from Helen. Would it be safe to say the next CEI for the MS4 permit cycle would be post-construction? So two questions there. Is it randomly chosen?
I'll start with the post-construction. I would say no.
Okay.
Not unless you just had your audit and then you're not going to be due for your CEI in 2 years. The requirements in the permit probably won't even. I need to when the permit is issued, because it's not final yet, it's on public notice. There are timelines in it, and we'll just have to be aware of those timelines. And we're not going to, come evaluate something that is not due yet.
Okay.
So what was the first part of that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the first question was, is the CEI focus area you choose completely random?
No, we predominantly have been looking at illicit and construction.
Okay.
That's a pretty big chunks of the program. And so I think those are what we look at most. Operation and maintenance, I think, is a third. But I think at least the last couple of years, the focus has been on Minute Control Measure 3 and Minute Control Measure 2. Of course, if there is, if the MS4 is interested in us in looking at a part of their program as kind of a proactive, we'd be happy to entertain that. We're not opposed to it, but at least, from a programmatic, we've been mostly doing illicit and construction.
All right. I just lost my view of the chat when I shared my screen. So if there were any other questions, maybe we'll get to that here after I finish this.
Okay. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. And before I get started, I just wanted to, thankfully, I see a lot of people I know on this call, but there are some new names that I'm seeing. And for those of you who've not met Robbie, he really does have the heart of a teacher during these audits, which is really helpful. He certainly does have a job to do with the audit, but he loves to educate. And so just really thankful for that posture that he has during these audits. So with that, let me get started. So again, I didn't really introduce myself that much. But my name's Steve Casey. I'm a civil engineer with Civil and Environmental Consultants, and have had the privilege of working with several MS4s, primarily around the Middle Tennessee area, and for a long time. And looking forward to this, I guess, fourth round of permit that I will have worked under once this draft permit becomes final. And I saw Paul Davis on the call. He has a lot more permits he's worked under, and I'm privileged to have worked with him over the years. So I'm glad he's listening too. Okay, so what the structure of my portion of this is to share with you the results that we received from the 8 MS4 participants to this questionnaire. We had 9 questions. We had a lot of people view the questions. And so if you didn't get a chance to respond, this is the kind of thing where if you have follow-up questions after this, Robbie and I would be happy to, talk on the phone or whatever with you. But this, I hope, will help spark some ideas, maybe some discussion, and give y'all just a sense maybe of what your peers are thinking. And so we're just going to go through these questions, and then I've got a few takeaway slides at the end. So this first question was asking about your top 2 or 3 concerns for your program when your audit was about to happen. So before you'd gone through it. And here's the bullet point list of things that that y'all said was your concern. And so you can see mapping deficiencies, worried about that, are concerned about it. Lack of record keeping, that was a real strong theme. I'm not sure about the getting updated endangered species info from the state. Not completely clear what that was, but that was one of the part of the feedback. And you can see the others there. I see a lack of. There was a lot of lack ofs that I saw. There was a concern about administrative penalties. Interesting. There was someone wishing that they had had an updated MTAS model ordinance to go along with the last permit. So that was the first question. And then the next question is asking what were your concerns after the audit, and did they change? And so you can see there was some different responses here. There was coordination with a co-permittee. There was the question about how we compare to other MS4s, keeping the ordinance current, strengthening it to address compliance issues. Again, insufficient funding. Engineering plans review was one that was interesting. I think just a understanding that maybe what had been done in terms of plans review needed some additional support. And then there was maybe some inconsistencies, or at least apparent inconsistencies, between the permit and TDEC examples of compliance. And as Robbie alluded to, the MS4 permitting program is it's kind of complicated. It's got a lot of latitude in it to you've got a general permit that is meant to apply to about 100 small MS4s. And so just within that framework, there's going to be opportunities for different interpretations. So anyway, that was the response on that question. Question 3 was asking about which minimum control measure do you struggle with the most and why? And I just found it interesting, even in a relatively small subset of responses, 8 responses, every single MCM was named. There wasn't a consistent theme. And so you can see the lack of clarity in the wordy ordinance and lack of support when issuing an NOV. That was for the illicit discharge measure. Construction runoff control program, lack of effective EPSC for construction. associated with development. And then some of the backdrop to that response had to do with really a lack of apparent or felt support by the city because of not wanting to seem unfriendly to development. Good housekeeping there. It was interesting. This said that the good housekeeping training for employees was easy, but seemed ineffective. And then there was the public outreach, public education, kind of a general lack of public interest. There was actually a couple responses about this, and a seeming complacency about environmental issues. And then MCM5, the permanent stormwater management, just a real lack of knowledge with these stormwater control measures of these B&P owners lacking knowledge about their system. And then letters reminding those owners about the needed inspections were ignored or undeliverable. And then the fourth question here was about what are some ways you've effectively communicated information about your program to those that aren't in the stormwater industry every day. And so it's an interesting kind of spectrum of responses here. And certainly social media was, saw that a couple places. There was an interesting response about starting discussions with stormwater about fishing, boating, or swimming, and just trying to make that connection there. Another one I found interesting is magazine advertisements, including a Spanish magazine. That was over in West Tennessee. That very innovative, in my opinion. And there was you can see presentations, meetings, just getting in front of people face to face. And then you've got the website, more of a passive way, but still the big spectrum of ways that that y'all said that you communicated with these non-stormwater industry folks. And then question 5 was, how do you measure program effectiveness? And I'm sure, as you know, this is a permit requirement to evaluate the effectiveness of your program. And it can be elusive. I love this, the response, the last response I wrote down there. Right, how do you? But this was some of the responses: performing a mock audit every year, tying it to the number of illicit discharges from year to year, number of people participating in outreach events, number of compliments. I liked that one. Increasing number of stormwater control measures. So as development continues to happen and you've got more of these privately owned stormwater control measures, certainly they would need to be maintained, but that was one approach to determine the effectiveness of a program. And then you can see soliciting public feedback through QR codes and different printed materials or signage out in the community, and then directing people back to the website. So, and then question 6, was the information and coordination provided prior to the audit helpful for your preparation? And as I'm sure Robbie was glad to see, this was, it was a resounding yes. Someone even put in that it was a relief and very helpful. I guess that person may have been anxious about the meeting. Felt comfortable with expectations. Communication was clear and consistent. So that was some positive feedback there. And so I hope that's encouraging to those of you who are on the call that may not have been through an audit yet. Having been through a few with Robbie, I can testify he is very clear in his communication. Question 7 was about the advanced notification time frame, and most people said yes, that was plenty of time. It's 2 to 3 weeks. Adequate depending on weather was one of the responses. Another just said it was a matter of compiling data. And then there was one that said that longer would be better. But it is not just a surprise visit. As Robbie said earlier, there's advanced notice given, and there's also some information he requests at the beginning, so that he has time to digest some of that before showing up at your at the MS4 in order to really make that time more efficient on site. And then question 8 was, were audit findings and resultant corrective actions communicated clearly? And resounding yes on that. One said that they had to request clarification and that that was sufficient. And then finally, the question was, what guidance would you give other MS4s on prepping, participating, and responding to an audit? And the a lot of people saying, talking about documentation, talking about gathering information prior to the audit and asking questions. I liked this one. It says, make documentation easy for yourself. You're going to end up with a lot of information demonstrating compliance with a lot of requirements. And so it is important to make that documentation easy for yourself. And then organizing the documentation around the audit checklist can really help speed things up during the audit. And then one who had experienced a virtual audit just mentioned about the need to understand the technology. So with those questions, I'm just curious, and y'all may not use this a lot, but there are some participating participant reaction tools. If there are any of these feedback in here that you could resonate with, I'm just curious if y'all could do like a thumbs up or something like that, just so I can get some feedback. Or if y'all want to put in the chat something that you don't agree with, or maybe have a question about, you can do that. And then I'm going to move on to these last couple slides. Okay. So takeaways from this: documentation, documentation, documentation. You've heard it said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen, or if it's not recorded, it didn't happen. I added some color to that. It's not typed in a geodatabase, a spreadsheet, or other digital file. And I've heard this from Robbie over the years that often he sees evidence of the program functioning by just how things are going in the city, but there's often some issue with the documentation, and it's not something that maybe comes naturally to all of us, but it can be as simple as typing a quick note to the file and saving it. It can be scanning a written Post-it note of something that you did, or a conversation you had with a landowner, which was a public education and outreach opportunity. But those anecdotal type stories told during an audit don't hold as much weight as if they are written down and presented as, here's evidence of compliance with what we said we were going to do in regards to the permit. So certainly documentation. Next, the organization of the written program and the ease of inputting documentation and then tracking that and reporting from it. And I just added this, especially in light of the draft permit. And I'm still reading through the draft permit. I would say I've done a cursory review of it at this point, but I've seen enough of it to see that there are a lot of very explicit annual reporting metrics that are being required. And so organizing the written program in such a way that you're really focusing on capturing the information that demonstrates compliance is really, really important. And then finally, I wanted to add this in about connecting the dots of permit compliance and serving citizens. Or if you're on a university campus as an MS4, serving the campus community. But just asking this question, or some thoughts here. How can the permit required mapping, for example, improve the level of service for your organization? And then just a couple of things that come to mind as Robbie and I were talking about this, getting ready for this. Emergency response is an obvious one. Having a good map of your stormwater infrastructure is really important. If there's a spill, you can track where that spill might discharge. But then there's also this infrastructure assessment for maintenance. And particularly with the American Rescue Plan funding and all this talk of infrastructure investment, having a good inventory and map of your system is really a prerequisite to a proactive infrastructure improvement plan. And so having the MS4 permit require that, that could easily be leveraged then to help with the level of service, improving the level of service to the organization. And then leveraging that information to identify trends in the data, if you will. There's lots of public education opportunities and requirements in the permit. And so tracking information, even if it were just one-on-one conversations with landowners about a bank stabilization need, or educating someone about, maintenance of their septic system so that it's not discharging, to a creek, or talking to others about landscaping practices, documenting that, tracking that, and then identifying trends and using that information to inform elected officials. I know that elected officials have a lot on them. Stormwater programs are just one of many programs within these cities and counties. And so having information that is easily digestible and has been tracked over time, and then if they have questions, you can certainly dive into the details, but having that information just really helps with communicating with elected officials. And then tying the MS4 program work to prevent future water quality issues, such as working to delist a stream, or maybe keep a stream off, maybe an unassessed stream off of the 303D list, meaning a stream with unavailable parameters for different pollutants. Having that, ultimately, when you think about the mapping, for example, you're mapping all the outfalls into the waters of the state that flow through the MS4. And so having the streams themselves improve in terms of water quality is tremendous evidence of the effectiveness of the program, but it's also improving the level of service to the community through better water quality for fishing, swimming, those sorts of things. And so ultimately, these types of things help to support this ever elusive parameter of evaluating program effectiveness. So that is all I've got. I see several chats here. I haven't opened it yet, but I'm guessing there are some questions here.
Steve, there was one clarification.
Okay.
I misspoke. The period for doing an audit and a CEI is not based on a 5-year permit cycle. It's on a 5-year basis. So it's kind of independent. Over in a perfect world, they both would coincide, but we know the world's not perfect. So it's a 5-year cycle, a 5-year period, independent of the actual permit that you're in. But we will only look at those respective years during the audit. At what you were technically covered, the permit you're covered under, and the requirements at that time.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Any other questions here? I'm just looking through the chats here. Let's see.
Some positive feedback. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Tell Mr. Lee, let him know we're doing a good job.
I didn't see any other questions, just mostly comments.
Yeah, and Amy mentioned about the anecdotal stories, seeing where communities should have more formal documentation, especially on program assessments. Yeah, that's good. Let's see. Okay, good. Yeah, good feedback there. I'm curious if, has anybody had any, I'm going to ask a pretty targeted question here to the group, but has anybody had any real success stories, for example, with elected officials after an audit? Like, has the audit, or maybe not just elected officials, but other, like a city manager or something like that, where the audit has helped with communicating needs for the program? Just curious.
Steve,
Yeah.
I'll
Helen?
speak to, I mean, we probably had one of the most recent experiences. I can't speak for everybody else, but we were able to get some things done that were kind of on a list of unimportance. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
The back burner,
Mhm.
you know, and so, you know, it's still a push. I mean, you know, we work together all the time. And I think it would be helpful to have help from other MS4s and TNSA, and, you know, to be able to maybe come up with some kind of generic presentation to give to, you know, these board members or councilmen, women, and kind of help push that along. I mean, I know we have those resources available now, but it's just so hard to, I guess, maybe ignite the flame and get people to care. So, but we were able to get a lot of kind of to-dos done after we got that report sent to the mayor. So, you know, there's a lot of encouragement, I guess, from, you know, previous staff that we've had that were like, hey, you know, anytime you send a letter, it usually is encouraging for stormwater purposes. So.
Good. Thank you. That's helpful feedback.
Hey, Steve, this is Josh Rogers talking on Carna Levitt's. And we're here together with Jamon Bass. But maybe Robbie could speak to this if he remembers. But I believe that our initial fee increase many years ago for the utility was prompted by an audit noting lack of funds collected. So that's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
I don't remember that specifically, but I'm getting older every day, so you know I'm doing good just to be. No, I would be surprised if I imagine. Well, I'm glad to hear that whatever we wrote you was effective at helping you get the budget that you need, and the resources, however, through the utility or through just a straight budget. Typically, we don't have the authority to talk about budgets. Now, in the original permit, there was some language in there, but we look for the requirements. It's up to the jurisdiction to appropriately scale and budget it. But I have gotten feedback over the years that it's helpful for us to highlight some of the missing components, because then that ends up becoming the justification or the motivator to get those things funded. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah.
Other questions? Robbie, could you maybe speak to, you mentioned about the plans review, inspections, that continuous kind of process where you like to have one site that you can kind of follow through, if possible. But I wonder if you could maybe speak to what's your approach to the in-field component of, like, how should someone prepare, an inspector prepare for that in-field portion of the audit? And what should they expect?
Well, I guess the short answers would be, do what you normally do, because that's what I need to observe.
Right.
If what you're currently doing isn't everything that's in your written procedures, then you might want to compare and contrast to make sure that you're doing what your paperwork says you should be doing, because that's what we, as well as a citizen or an attorney of a citizen, will be looking at to say, it says on Tuesday you're going to do tacos, and you're not doing tacos on Tuesday. And so, that's something that y'all, so part of it is mainly just the focus on, evaluating the process and itself.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, citizens or environmental groups or something like that. The audit is really, it's helpful for the MS4 to understand, the connection between what's written and what is being done in practice. And, when there's turnover, for example, and someone comes in new and has all this written documentation that maybe they haven't had a chance to go through, that's a really important thing to do and revise if they're going to plan to change how they're doing things. Because like you said, if a citizen or someone else wanted to really dig in and see what's written, compare it to what's being done, then that's what this audit is helping to guard against. It's going to hopefully find that and help the, raise awareness for the MS4 that, hey, this needs to be cleaned up.
Right. Well, and it's ultimately what I want to see is that, you went out and you did a fair, effective inspection. You followed your procedures. The procedures say you use this form. And so that was the form you used. And then ultimately, I like to get a copy of that filled out inspection form from that day. And then I'll get 3 or 4 previous months from that same inspection site. So it shows your monthly inspections, right? So just be prepared to maybe have an example that has that length of a construction history to it. And then, like I said, the ones that I typically want to look at would be ones the more, challenging or complicated or, higher designed element kind of sites. And those are the ones that, have sediment basins, engineered structures, and then the buffers. And so if everything lines up, that'd be the side I'd look at. Okay, I'll pause there.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions anybody has? Got a couple minutes left here.
Well, let me talk just a little bit. I can't help but talk. So, and I didn't see this in my slide set, but just for those people that haven't gone through an audit yet, to give you a little more of what you can expect, you'll get a phone call from us about 3 to 4 weeks in advance of the audit. So we give you a lot of heads up. We try to give at least 3 to 4 weeks, and that way you can do all the prep. It's not necessarily opportunity for create something that's not there, but to make sure you can get everything in front of you, get prepared for it, get confident with what you got, that sort of a thing. And to provide, Brown and I will send you a laundry list of the different parts and pieces of your program that we'll need to review, and the parts and pieces that you'll need to send to us initially for initial review prior to coming out. And that's predominantly going to be your ordinances and policies, things like that. But like Jim said in the comments, the more information you get to us in advance, the more we can do our homework prior to coming out and seeing you, which just helps to expedite it. And basically, I'm coming in just confirming what you've already showed me, right? And so we'll give you a heads up. You'll have about 3 to 4 weeks to plan for it. You'll get us the information. I'll send you after I call and we figure out what date is going to work for you guys. I'll send a confirmation email that kind of formally confirms that we're going to do it on this date. And then here's the materials that I need to see, and here's the date that I need those materials by. And then, of course, we're always open in the interim. So if there's anything that we can help, answer questions, getting you prepared for it, we're happy to do that too. But that may give you a sense of what to expect. It's not going to be, we're going to knock on your door that morning and expect to do an audit. We're going to give you plenty of heads up because we want it to be a fair, representation of what you guys do. Right.
Related to that, what is your expectation for a written stormwater management plan? Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, it's more of a collection of these documents you're asking for, I presume.
Right. Oh, so when I ask to see it, someone's stormwater management plan, do I expect to get one 3-ring binder?
Right.
Not for Michael Hunt's program, no. It'd be like 9 binders. No, I think ultimately what we want to see is that you have all the parts and pieces. If it can be put in a format that makes sense into one document, great. And I have had some audits I've done on smaller jurisdictions where they're effectively able to have all of those parts and pieces and procedural language in one document, which is really helpful. So I just need to see presence of. I don't need to see that it's snapped into one document itself. But the more you can think about that, because consider this. Robbie has been in this program for a long time, and so I kind of know what I'm looking for. I kind of know what to ask for. I kind of know when you show me something, is that kind of what I'm looking for? And if you're unclear, I can kind of guide you to, oh, we do have that. And so that is, I think, kind of the back and forth that we look to do, just to make sure that, we're all square on what is and is not required, and how what we need to have as far as verification that has been provided. I see that Michael Hunt gave me a smiley face.
Yeah. Yep.
Now check the new draft permit. Now this talk is not about the new draft permit,
right,
so we don't get off rail on it, but the permit is on public notice. Now is your time to provide comment, or you can't provide comment for another 5 years. So give us some feedback. There were some changes made throughout the permit, in addition to just the post-construction section, trying to be more clear, where we have done audits and I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking you to provide me, and you don't know exactly what to show me, to make sure we try to take opportunities to clarify in the permit what we all mean. So everybody kind of knows what's expected. But check all that stuff out and let us know, what type of, any feedback that you have, either individually or through TNSA group, however you want to do it. But that feedback is critical. And hopefully through the iterative process, we have a permit that is, as streamlined, as efficient, and as effective as possibly can be. Because there's always going to be more of stormwater issues than us. So the permit has to be structured such that it gives us the best chance for success, right?
Yep. All right.
I noticed Brown is on here. He does some of the other audits too. If there's any questions for him, or if Brown, if you had any thoughts that I hadn't touched on, or at least just want to say hi to everybody.
Thank you, Robbie. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that intro. The only thing that I wanted to add is that I miss pre-COVID times when it was part of the 2-day or 2.5-day in-person audit process, that at sometime on the very last day was always scheduled to meet with leadership. And that was something that I did very consistently. COVID kind of knocked that out for several years very consistently, to not do it. So that's something that I think really helped, is to sit down, and I did kind of have that set the talking points to talk to leadership, to talk them through what the program is, and to explain how complex it is, and what it takes to run it, and how many pieces and parts, and how to coordinate all that, and how much it takes. So I do miss that. I hope we can get back to that, just because I know that helps the MS4s, and I've got a lot of good feedback from those coordinators.
Good.
Thanks, Brown.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank y'all for listening and participating.
Thank you very much.
Man, I can't believe we did that in about an hour.
Yeah.
that Robbie did in an hour.
I don't want to be calling out names like Steve's calling out names, but
Now, thank y'all very much for the opportunity. We've worked really hard to standardize our process, to make it clear and, and as revealing of true compliance status as possible. And so your feedback is really helpful, and appreciate all the positive feedback. but we also appreciate, negative or constructive feedback. And so, y'all have to sit through 2.5 days of me and Brown. And so, besides, the personality involved, I mean, the process needs to be something that you feel is fair and equitable. So, feel free always to give us feedback, please.
Thanks, guys. I did approach them for this presentation, so I appreciate you two, taking time to do this. I know you guys are really busy and have a lot going on, but I really appreciate you both doing this for everybody. I know it's really helpful.
Yeah.
So some of these folks can't attend conference and they need a little bit of extra help. So I think it's great that you guys are able to do this today. Thank you so much.
Love to talk stormwater.
Yeah, thank you. Same here.
At this time, I do not have another TNSA talk scheduled. I'm trying to get one with John with MTAS talking about enforcement. So that's on my list. And I really need to do one, and I just have not been able to research everything, but for our Club Express program, especially since membership's coming up. But I'll get one of those together. I need to figure out how to work I can't even think of the word where you got the forum where you guys can ask questions and talk about different topics. So I think that would be really helpful. I think you guys can also share documents on there, but just look forward to any emails about that. I did send an email out requesting comments regarding the new permit. So I will send that out again this afternoon, but you guys will also receive an attendance email with your PDH. So that will be coming up. But if you have any other topics, either related to this and you want something a little bit more in depth, or if there's another topic that you're interested in, please let me know. And we will work on that for you to see if we can get some speakers together for you. We have some really, really smart folks across this state that are willing to talk and help you through everything. So do not hesitate to ask and reach out to any of us if you need help with anything. And any other questions or closing words or anything else anybody needs before we get going? All right, I think we're good, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody, and
Bye.
have a good afternoon. Thank you.